Chapter 12. Power. Alas, alas, that all men should possess Alaya, divine essence, be one with the great soul, and that possessing it, Alaya should so little avail them, the voice of silence. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. Man is made in the image of God. This image, however, is not the corporeal likeness of a personal God, for God has no personality which can be imitated. But if we take God to mean the supreme power which is sent forth from the Absolute, and through whose many manifestations all things are brought forth, then we must recognize that this God must have all power. It is the image of this all power that man is made. Jesus, who stands as a symbol of perfected man, said, "All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth." If this be true of the highest type of man, it is potentially true of all men. For all power is given unto man because he is created in the image of God, although in most men this power is latent, because man in the aggregate has not yet come into his birthright, atonement with his Father in heaven or higher self. The omnipotent powers of God operate through intelligent centers of power in the manifested universe, and to make it possible for perfected man to have all power in heaven and in earth, and to fulfill the prophecy that he shall become as one of us, the gods, these centers of power must have their more or less active reflections in man, for man is truly the microcosm of the macrocosm. All the lower kingdoms have certain powers, but only man has the power of the Godhead, with which, when he manifests them on his own, he can create the new heaven and a new earth of the apocalypse, wherein dwelleth righteousness. When man awakes to a realization that all powers in heaven and in earth are latent within himself, in heaven the powers of the Godhead, in earth the powers of all creatures and all nature, he will begin to reclaim his lost heritage, lost only in the sense of his having deserted it. In most Eastern teachings we find hints of these wondrous powers and are told that they represent steps up which every candidate for mastery must laboriously climb. The Western world is awakening to the use of some of these powers, especially the power to control disease and dominate environment. The powers of man are 6 in number, synthesized in a 7th, the astral light of Eliphas Levi, and correspond to the 7 principles of man. Each power has its seat in a certain sacred center in the body. These 7 centers, each with its 7 subsidiary centers, are sometimes called the 49 crucified saviors, signifying that the vital power of these centers is at present misused and crucified, and ere they can become man's savior, they must be resurrected from the tomb of matter and made to function in a higher state. They are called the 49 fires because their light guides man to Superman. These powers are: 1. The supreme power, Parashakti. 2. The power of intellect, Jnana Shakti. 3. The power of will, Ichcha Shakti. 4. The power of thought, Kriya Shakti. 5. The power of life principle, Kundalini Shakti. And 6. The power of speech, Mantrika Shakti. Each power is an emanation from one of the Elohim, hence must be reflected in man to make him the image of God. For God, like the white light, in passing through the prism of matter, manifests in a 7-fold manner. Each power has its positive and negative aspects, and until we can correlate with the positive ray of its progenitor, we are buffeted by its negative aspect. It is impossible to consider these powers separately, for without the cultivation of all, none can be truly operative. The supreme power is the power which man has of correlating with divinity through the breath. All creatures breathe, and we are accustomed to say that breath is life. And ordinarily, when man ceases to breathe, he ceases to live objectively. But man alone, because he can bring his other powers to bear upon it, can make the breath more than the mere drawing in of physical life. Within the auric zone of the earth, there are many subtle forces unknown to science and barely mentioned by even the deeper students of mysticism, because so sacred, so potent, and so powerful that their very names must scarce be whispered. Breath, combined with will and thought, is the power by which man reaches up to the higher worlds and opens an avenue through which these potent forces may reach this inner self and lift above mundane things, at the same time regenerate his physical body. There are those who, holding the thought of health, breathe for physical health and obtain it. But it is possible to use the breath to obtain far more than mere physical health. Its misuse or negative aspect can also bring disasters undreamed of by the pseudo-occultist. Realize that you are responsible for every breath that you breathe, for through the breath you are spreading either God love or disease. It is commonly thought that the outgoing breath contains a virulent poison, and so it does if you permit it, for it carries off certain effluvia from the decaying atoms within you. Are you willing to be a source of infection? If this is your will and your thought, then it is what you become. When the breath is foul, you are abusing your body. It is sick and out of order. It is within your power to be healthy, to be a source of inspiration and life to all. For health and life and love are as infectious as their opposites. Therefore, every time you become conscious of it, use your power of the breath to breathe in divine love, to breathe in spiritual life, that it shall so cleanse and transmute your physical atoms that your breath shall become as that of a little child. Mind or intellect should not be confused with the power of thought. The human mind is the reflection in man of the great universal mind, the divine ideation, or what some call cosmic consciousness. It is the vehicle through which thought operates. In man, mind manifests in a threefold manner: the subconscious or animal mind, the conscious or human mind, and the superconscious or divine mind. The subconscious mind is composed of the consciousness of every cell, organ, and nerve ganglia synthesized and overshadowed by the animal soul. A reflection or shadow of this power can be traced in all the kingdoms, even those in which it is still latent and which have no power of thought. Being the mind of the animal soul, it is below the consciousness of the human reincarnated ego. To its control are relegated all those functions which operate without man's conscious control: respiration, circulation, secretion, excretion, etc. But when these functions are deranged beyond the power of the subconscious, to restore it appeals to the human consciousness for aid through pain or discomfort, and man becomes aware that something is wrong. The subconscious mind is the vehicle of the passions and desires normal to the animal soul, and which it seeks to gratify, but which must be controlled and directed to their highest use by the will of the human ego. This lower or animal mind functions through centers in the medulla oblongata, the cerebellum, and also in the solar plexus and other nerve ganglia containing gray matter. When these centers are upset by inharmony or the baser emotions, fear, hate, envy, jealousy, sorrow, etc., the functions controlled by them are inhibited or perverted, and the physical, mental, and moral health suffers. While if they are stimulated by peace, tranquility, and harmony, or exalted by joy and love, their normal functions are activated or increased with corresponding welfare of the whole organism. Habits are the result of training the subconscious mind to act in a certain way. Most vague and illogical dreams are the result of the subconscious mind wandering about in the astral world during the absence of the human ego from the body during sleep, and therefore without its guidance or supervision. Hence, it is comparatively easy to train the subconscious mind not to wander, so that only the spiritual lessons given by the higher self through symbolic visions or logical, well-remembered dreams will be brought back to the waking consciousness. From the above, we will see that we should treat the subconscious mind, as well as the body, as a good and faithful servant, but should not look to it for a higher degree of intelligence than we could expect from the highest animal, and certainly should never look to it for guidance in moral or spiritual problems. The conscious or human mind, manas, is the consciousness of the human reincarnated ego inhabiting the body and limited by its faculties. It functions through the cortex of the brain, through whose center it controls the subconscious. It is the great battleground where the ego is influenced from below by the animal mind and from above by the divine mind, yet having free will to choose its own course of action. It is called lower or higher manas according as it identifies itself with the desires of the animal mind or the desires of its Father in heaven. Its characteristic is self-consciousness, the feeling of I am I. The following are some of its manifestations when placed under the influence or control of material conditions. A. The power of the mind in interpreting our sensations. B. Its power in recalling past ideas or memory and raising future expectation. C. Its power as exhibited in what are called by modern psychologists the laws of association, which enables it to form persisting connections between various groups of sensation and possibilities of sensation, and thus generate the notion or idea of an external object. D. Its power in connecting our ideas together by the mysterious links of memory, and thus generating the notion of self or individuality. The following are some of its manifestations when liberated from the bonds of matter. A. Clairvoyance. B. Psychometry. The superconscious or divine mind is the mind of the higher self or Father in heaven, one with God. This divine consciousness overshadows the human mind, much as the human overshadows the subconscious. It is from this source that the higher guidance called conscience and intuition comes, and its voice is often mistaken for the voice of some divine being or master. It functions through the pineal gland and pituitary body located in the middle of the brain. The power of will is truly a godlike one, for it enables man to follow the will of God, or setting up his own will, to follow his own desire in opposition to the will of God, or the great law of good. If God's will were merely reflected in or imposed upon man, he would of necessity have to follow that will, which would then be not a power given him to use as he would, but a leading string which he must follow. Man alone has free will. The animals are subject to the will of the entity governing the group soul of their species. An animal acts because of instinct, not because of free will. Man, through his power of will, can reach up into the world of divine mind and bring to himself all the power of mind, or he can grovel with the beast in the world of desire, and by his superior powers intensify its evils. Thus it is that in a world created by a God of love, man has the power to create evil. Will is a power bestowed upon man, for the use of which man alone is responsible. He is not a mere puppet forced to follow the will of God. Thought is the power by which man creates images or molds within which divine ideation manifests, while imagination is the power by which he comprehends the subjective ideal, the outer semblance of which may come into objective manifestation through thought. For instance, a painter may in imagination comprehend ideal love, but he must use thought to mold the details in his effort to represent it on canvas. Psychology says that every thought tends to express itself in terms of muscular activity, unless counteracted by a more powerful thought of opposite character. Thus, through the powers of thought, man creates his world, or as the Bible expresses it, as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. And because of this mold-making power, that which is repeatedly thought of will ultimately manifest. If we think continually of ourselves as poor or sick or unhappy, we are making it more possible for poverty, sickness, and unhappiness to manifest. In fact, we are creating a mold into which they must flow. Conversely, if we think of peace, plenty, health, and happiness, they are just as certain to manifest. Thought manifests in a dual way. It is the middle principle, and together with mind and breath, can be used to draw inspiration from the divine, or it can be dragged down and made to waste its force on trivialities, self-pity, etc. When you recognize its power to make images or molds into which the life force naturally flow and shape themselves and become objective, it is not to be wondered at that if wasted on every ache and pain or poverty, troubles or petty worries, they grow apace and become objective. The power of the life principle is the magnetodynamic force which correlates man with nature, and through which he either dominates it or is dominated by it. It works in nature to readjust and harmonize spirit and matter. It is the power of rhythm, the power of all forces which take a serpentine path. Frequently persons say they know a storm is coming by their aches and pains, and we know that all animals are warned by the same power to protect themselves from the approaching storm. In man, this power is far more than a common consciousness with nature, for by it, if he wills so to be, he is literally the ruler of nature or the Lord of creation. It is through this power that he impresses his state of development upon the cosmos. When storms, earthquakes, tidal waves, volcanoes, or catastrophes of any kind take place, many say, "Behold the work of God." How insignificant is man! This is false. God never made a storm, an earthquake, or a catastrophe of any kind, for God is the great law of love. They are all evidence of man's power. Had man never sent out evil thoughts, wicked words, blasphemies, and curses, the earth's aura could never be so charged with destructive forces that a catastrophe was necessary to dissipate them and bring about equilibrium. Had man never exercised demoniacal cruelty to his brother man, neither the animate nor inanimate worlds would be at enmity with him. When a cataclysm takes place, instead of saying that man is but a helpless atom before the manifestation of nature, we should say, "Behold, how powerful is man." For it is by the misuse of this power of the life principle, exercised through free will, that man has brought suffering and destruction into a world created by love. So it is with a man's body. Unless it has been purified through love and spiritual aspiration, this power of the life force, which in ordinary man is almost dormant, will bring about readjustments in his body comparable to earthquakes and cyclones. Therefore, to meditate upon this force or its center in the body and strive to rouse it into activity is extremely dangerous, for such practices have been known to cause insanity and instant death. The disciples said of Jesus, "What manner of man is this, that even the winds and sea obey him?" This indicates what perfected man can do when he uses his powers according to law of love. To overcome fear is the first step on the path, for fear can be conquered only by love. If fear were conquered absolutely ere man learned to correlate his power with God love, conditions would be far worse than today. For even fear is the servant of God. Fear is a paralyzing and disintegrating force, and if it were not that the catastrophes caused by man's disobedience engendered fear, the mistakes of man would become a solid wall of darkness, shutting him away from God. Fear is continually working as the great disintegrator, in reality helping the force of the evil created by man, which is like a miasmic mist, to precipitate and exhaust its power upon the earth in the form of storms and catastrophes, and in the human body as sickness, disease, and death, instead of accumulating indefinitely. When mankind learns the law of love, fear will have no more work to do and will cease to appall man at every step. God did not give man fear. Man himself brought it into manifestation. From another aspect, fear is love perverted. In one sense, fear is the angel of the flaming sword guarding the entrance to Eden. Eden being a perfected earth and a perfected physical body, with its trees bearing every manner of good fruit for man, that is his powers. It was the tree which grew in the midst of the garden, or this kundalini or serpentine force which functions in the spinal column that proved man's undoing. Only when this force is mastered and fear vanquished can man re-enter Eden, cultivate the trees, and eat of the fruit thereof as a faithful husbandman. To conquer fear, you must resolutely use all your powers to create good, for as long as you create evil, you must have fear to help disintegrate and dissipate it. Beware of fear that spreadeth like the black and soundless wings of a midnight bat, between the moonlight of the soul and thy great goal that loometh in the distance far away. Fear, O disciple, kills the will and stays all action. The path that leadeth on is lighted by one fire, the light of daring burning in the heart. The more one dares, the more he shall obtain. The more he fears, the more the light shall pale, and that alone shall guide. Dare, do, keep silent. Become one with the silence in which all forces are potent. Speech is one of the greatest powers, for it includes the powers of sound, number, color, and when written, form. We are all more or less familiar with the power of sound, both in the spoken word and the chanting of mantra, etc. One who masters this power has the world at his feet. This is illustrated to a slight degree by the ease with which an eloquent speaker can sway an audience. In this chapter, but a hint can be given, for it would require a separate lesson to even outline this subject. The point of the development each soul has reached is revealed in the tone of the voice, just as nature tones indicate nature's stage of evolution. We may carefully control our words and manner of expression, but the tones of the voice will reveal the true feeling back of the words. This inner attitude is quickly recognized, especially by children and animals. In fact, tone is the keynote of man's power over the animal kingdom, for by the tone he either arouses enmity or love and obedience. The spoken word can never die, but will go on working out the potency and power, not only of its tone, but also of its color, number, and form, and the thought pictures created by it in the minds of his hearers, together with the power of the will which sent it forth. Every word and tone spoken by man is registered upon the etheric substance of the Akashic records. This principle has been demonstrated and its truth verified in a physical way in the phonograph. Speech is the first power for man to master as a medium, through which all his powers may be made operative on earth. It is said that before the voice can speak in the presence of the masters, it must have lost the power to wound. To speak in the presence of the masters means speaking as a master, or that the spoken word will carry with the mastery of conditions. To bring to your mind some of the practical effects of this power, we would ask you for one day to note carefully the effect your words have on those about you. Many pupils ask for something practical to do to develop occult powers and manifest the higher life. Noting the effect on your word is practical and most important, and a practice which can be indulged in without fear of dangerous consequence. And until at least some conception of the power of speaking kindly and lovingly, but to some purpose, and some degree of mastery over it has been attained, the development of all other occult powers will be retarded if not actually prevented. God spake the word, and the word was created. Man speaks one little word and a new world of gladness is created in his brother's life. Or man speaks a word and a brother is disheartened and gives up the fight. Or a sister's good name is taken from her and she is pushed out into the darkness, is pushed down under the feet of the multitude. Think what one kind word can do, how it can bring sunshine and peace and courage into your own life and the lives of others. Waste no force in frivolous or negative chatter, speaking only positive words, words of love, words of power. If your brother offend you, speak words of love that your heart may send back nothing but love. Never withhold a sincere word of love or endearment or word of help, encouragement or health. A kind word spoken even to a stray dog will not to return to you void. Know well that until you have mastered this power and can speak words of health, strength, cheer, courage, and love, you had better follow the injunction. Let your communication be, yea, yea, nay, nay. For remember well, whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. The meaning of this is that any unkind, boastful, or untrue word is bound to return for you to prove and adjust, probably just when you think you have conquered. Be especially careful in regard to written words. When the world begins to understand this power, there will be fewer misleading statements sent out under the guise of occult teaching, which become snares and wiles to mislead those who are seeking enlightenment. We cannot emphasize too strongly this fact, that every idle word, either spoken or written, that man shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. As to how to attain and use these powers, they are yours now. They are in constant activity, and unless consciously directed toward the unification of mankind in God love, they are adding their force to the misery of life, both in your own body and in the whole cosmos. Hence, there is but one thing to do. Realize that God is love, and that the love is the one great law of all life, manifesting in you in this sevenfold path of power. If this realization seems difficult, set to work at it in earnest. Repeat it to yourself again and again. Breathe it. Vitalize it with the life principle. Think of it. Will it, grasp it. Impress it upon every atom of your manifested expressions of being. And the ultimate result can only be victory. When you synthesize your 6 powers in the 7th, the power of becoming one in consciousness with God love, which is the power proceeding from the heart, and always spoken of as the power of the diamond heart or the heart doctrine, then you can have nothing to fear, for perfect love casts out all fear. This is the power of becoming one with your higher self. Its seat is in the heart, for in the heart are centers corresponding to and connected with all the centers, as an electric switchboard may be connected with many substations. Therefore, by cultivating the heart qualities and dwelling in peace and love, you can awaken and dominate all the centers and make their cultivation easier. This is not some far-off possibility, for the instant you synthesize all your powers in the heart and seek to subserviate your life and action to the law of love, you are one in aim with your higher self, and this higher self will manifest more and more through you. Then will there be no death, for death will be swallowed up in victory. You have nothing to fear, for you are all-powerful. You have but to direct your power in accord with the universal law of God, which is love. Look around you and see the evil man's powers have wrought when working contrary to the law. Then think what they could accomplish if they had this great law working back of and through them. If but 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, the Christ love, ready to believe the spoken word of power as herein delivered to you, that you are today as gods, and that all power is given unto you in heaven and in earth, if you really will to become one with the great law of love, then the regeneration of the world would quickly be accomplished. And if but 7 souls, or even 3, can be gathered together and work consciously in a perfect realization of this truth, making a determined effort to work with the law, soon there will manifest on the earth plane a practical center of right living of such force and social magnitude that the whole earth will feel its influence, and the deplorable conditions under which the world now suffers will begin to adjust themselves. There is no use reading a lesson such as this and thinking it a mere theory, for it is more than mere theory. It comes to you as the word of power. It says to each soul, what are you going to do about it? On which side of the battle will you fight? Into whose coffers will you pour your substance, God's or Mammon's? Choose ye this day whom ye will serve. O fearless aspirant, look deep within the well of thine own heart and answer. Knowest thou of self the powers, O thou perceiver of external shadows? If thou dost, not then art thou lost.